Welcome to my video. Please like and subscribe to support me and give me the motivation to create more amazing videos. Mrs. Mary's Laundromat was located in the poorest neighborhood of the city. An area where people mostly survived on odd jobs like construction work, cleaning, or factory labor. Mrs. Mary, who was over 60, was a kind woman who always smiled at her customers. Even though her small shop didn't earn much. Mrs. Mary's laundromat wasn't large, it had only about 8 old washing machines. But it was a place where people often came. Not because the service was better than elsewhere, but because in this impoverished neighborhood, it was the only place where people could afford to pay to wash their clothes. Mrs. Mary was familiar with all her customers. From the muscular car mechanic who always came to do his laundry after work, to the single mother with a small child, trying to juggle 2 jobs at once. This laundromat was the center of the neighborhood. A place where people gathered, talked, and shared stories about their tough lives. However, one night, something strange happened. It was a cold December evening. Late at night when the laundromat was about to close. The night shift staff, Lisa, a middle-aged woman working part-time at the laundromat, saw a petite black girl walk in. She was wearing an old sweater that wasn't warm enough for winter. But what particularly caught Lisa's attention were the girl's eyes, deep, sad, and filled with an indescribable sorrow. The girl didn't say a word. She just quietly sat on a chair next to the washing machine at the back of the room. Lisa, with her motherly instinct, felt worried. Who is this child? Why is she here at this hour? Lisa wondered. She approached and gently asked, "What's your name? Do you need any help?" But the girl did not answer, her eyes were still fixed on the washing machine, as if waiting for something to emerge from inside. Lisa returned to the counter, watching the girl from a distance. After about half an hour of sitting silently, the girl stood up and quietly left, as if she had never been there. In the days that followed, Lisa told Mrs. Mary about the incident. Mrs. Mary also became concerned and decided to keep an eye on the girl. What worried her even more was that the girl continued to show up on subsequent nights. Always late when the laundromat was about to close. She would sit quietly in her usual spot, staring at the washing machine, and never speaking to anyone. The entire neighborhood began whispering about the girl's mysterious appearances. Some people said she might be the spirit of a child who had died, coming back to find her lost mother. Others said she was abandoned and had nowhere else to go. But no matter how people speculated, no one knew the exact answer. After several nights of watching, Mrs. Mary finally decided to report the incident to the local police. When Mrs. Mary reported the situation to the police station, the officers listened with interest. Although it wasn't a serious case, the mysterious appearance of a child each night at the laundromat made everyone uneasy. Especially Police Chief John, who had a deep concern for the happenings in this poor neighborhood. John was not just a police chief, he had been protecting and helping the community for many years. He had witnessed many unfortunate lives and understood that behind every strange event, there was often an emotional story. Chief John was no stranger to this neighborhood. He had served at the police station for almost 20 years. And almost everyone in the neighborhood knew him. John was a middle-aged man in his 50s. Tall but with a gentle face. His hair was sprinkled with gray. But his spirit remained strong and determined against social injustices. Like any other police officer, John couldn't avoid the pressures of the job. The area he managed was one of the toughest in the city. Crime, poverty, and injustice were things he faced daily. But what made John different was his compassion. He never forgot the struggling lives in the neighborhood. He often helped residents, whether by donating clothes and food to struggling families or assisting workers who lost their jobs. For John, his work wasn't just about arresting criminals, it was also about understanding, empathizing, and helping people regain hope in their lives. He believed that this was the real way to change the community. When he heard Lucy's story, Chief John felt that something deeper was going on. It wasn't just a girl showing up at a laundromat late at night, he sensed that behind Lucy's silence lay a tragic story. He decided he had to investigate the matter himself. After receiving the information from Mrs. Mary, John planned to monitor the laundromat. He wanted to understand why the girl came every night and whether there was any danger she might be facing. He couldn't ignore this, as his intuition told him this wasn't a coincidence. On the first night of the investigation, John, along with his two close colleagues, Officer Tim and Officer Laura, went to the laundromat after midnight. It was a cold winter night, and the streets of the neighborhood were eerily quiet. The wind howled through the old buildings, carrying a biting chill that cut through John's thick coat. When they arrived, the laundromat was still open as usual, but all the customers had left. The neon blue light from the signs cast a cold and strange atmosphere. Mrs. Mary had locked the shop from inside and was sitting behind the counter, waiting for the police to arrive. At the stroke of midnight, John and his colleagues waited patiently. They stood outside the laundromat, keeping a distance but always keeping an eye on the entrance. The night wind blew stronger, making the atmosphere colder and gloomier. Tim lit a cigarette, trying to stay warm while they waited. Suddenly, from the corner of the street, John saw the small figure of a girl approaching. It was Lucy. She was wearing an old coat, her shoes worn, and she walked slowly, quietly. John recognized her immediately from Mrs. Mary's description. When Lucy got closer, John signaled Tim and Laura to keep their distance. He wanted to approach the girl calmly, not wanting to scare her. Lucy entered the laundromat without noticing anyone was watching. She went straight to the old washing machine in the corner of the room, where she usually sat every night. John gently approached the door, then slowly opened it and stepped inside. The sound of the small bell above the door rang out. But Lucy did not turn around. She sat still, her eyes fixed on the washing machine in front of her. John stopped a reasonable distance away. Not too close to make her feel pressured but close enough to start a conversation. "Hello there," he said in a warm, caring voice. "Are you okay?" Lucy didn't respond or turn to look at him. She remained silent, as if she were in another world. John sat on a nearby chair, keeping his distance but never taking his eyes off her. "I'm John," he continued, trying to create a friendly atmosphere. "I'm the police chief here. What's your name?" This time, Lucy moved slightly. She lowered her head, as if debating whether to answer or not. Finally, in a small, weak voice, she replied, "My name is Lucy." It was the first step that John had succeeded in. He didn't rush to ask more, but simply said gently, "Nice to meet you, Lucy. Are you waiting for someone?" Lucy didn't answer, her eyes still glued to the washing machine. John didn't push her. He knew that sometimes it took time for a child like Lucy to open up and trust a stranger. After the first meeting, John decided he would continue to monitor Lucy on subsequent nights. He realized that Lucy wasn't just an ordinary homeless child. There was something very special about her, a deep pain that John sensed through her eyes. In the following nights, John continued to monitor and occasionally talk to Lucy. She didn't say much. But over time, John gradually understood that Lucy came to the laundromat for a personal reason. He began to come up with many hypotheses. Perhaps she had been abandoned or had lost someone important in her life. At the same time, John had his team investigate more about Lucy's identity, trying to find out where she lived and why she appeared every night at the laundromat. However, all efforts yielded no results. No one in the neighborhood knew about her, and there were no records of her family. John began to understand that perhaps only Lucy herself could solve this mystery. In the nights that followed, Chief John continued to spend time at the laundromat. He came not just to monitor, but for some reason, he felt the need to be there for Lucy. During their later encounters, he didn't try to force her to talk more. Instead, he just sat there, in a quiet corner of the shop, so she would feel safe and not threatened. John had seen many lives and witnessed countless heartbreaking stories. But Lucy was a mystery he couldn't understand immediately. She didn't seem like a typical abandoned or lost child. Lucy's eyes held a great pain. A pain far greater than what a child her age should have to endure. Though she still spoke very little. Whenever he appeared, Lucy would simply bow her head and continue staring at the washing machine in front of her. John gradually understood that perhaps the washing machine wasn't just an inanimate object to Lucy. It might be a symbol of something important in her life. Something that had been lost. But what was it? The answer remained elusive. And John knew he needed more time to understand. One evening, after Lucy sat quietly as usual, John decided to talk casually, without focusing on investigative questions. Just a conversation between two people. He began by telling her some stories from his life, things he experienced when he was young. The challenges of being a police officer. And the sorrow he had witnessed. Lucy listened but said nothing. However, her eyes began to show interest. This was the sign John had been waiting for. A sign that she might be ready to share her story. That night, John asked Lucy, "You often come here alone at night. Why do you choose this washing machine?" Lucy was silent for a moment. Her eyes looking deep into the washing machine as if it held a part of her past she didn't want to talk about. Finally, she spoke. Her voice soft and trembling. "My mom used to sit here." It was the first answer Lucy gave about her life. A short sentence. But it said so much. John remained calm. Not rushing to ask more. Just listening. "My mom and I used to come here every night after work." Lucy continued. "She worked so much. So hard. After work, she always brought me here to do the laundry. And we would sit in silence while we waited. She always said this was a place she could rest for a bit after a long day of labor." John nodded gently, careful not to interrupt her story. He knew that letting her speak freely would help her open up more. One day, Lucy continued, her voice growing softer. "My mom didn't come back. She had an accident on her way to work. She never came back." Lucy's words cut deep into John's heart. He felt as if everything was becoming clearer. Lucy wasn't just a homeless or lost child. She had lost the only family she had. Her beloved mother. And the laundromat was the only place where she felt close to her. John cautiously asked, "What happened to your mom?" Lucy sighed. Her eyes welling with tears as she continued her story. Her mother, Sarah, was a woman who worked tirelessly to provide for the two of them. Sarah was a devoted mother who gave all her love to her daughter. She worked various jobs. From cleaning houses for the wealthy to being a waitress at a small eatery. But her main job was doing laundry for hire. A grueling job with little pay. Sarah and Lucy had no fixed place to live. They stayed in a small, run-down rental near the laundromat. Every night after work, Sarah would bring Lucy to Mrs. Mary's laundromat to do laundry. And the two would sit together while the clothes dried. It was the only time of day they could be together in peace, free from the pressures of work and life. But then one day, an accident happened. Sarah was in a car accident on her way to work a night shift. She died instantly, leaving Lucy alone with no place to go. Since then, Lucy had lost her mother, the only person she had in the world. She had no other family, and no one came forward to take care of her. Lucy continued in a choked voice. I didn't know what to do. I kept coming back here, sitting by the washing machine, because I miss her. She always sat here. John felt Lucy's pain. She had not only lost her mother but also the only sense of safety she had ever known. The laundromat was where Lucy and her mother had shared their rare happy moments. Now, Lucy returned every night to find a piece of her mother, hoping that somehow her mother would come back. Chief John was overwhelmed by Lucy's story. He felt his heart tighten as he listened to her. As a father himself, he deeply understood a mother's love for her child. Losing the one person she loved most was surely an indescribable pain. John couldn't hold back his tears. Throughout his career, he had witnessed many tragic situations. But Lucy's story left him feeling more powerless than ever. He couldn't bring her mother back, nor could he erase the pain she was enduring. Lucy lowered her head, tears streaming down her young face. She didn't cry out loud, she just silently shed tears, as if the pain had become a part of her. John wanted to hold her, to tell her everything would be all right. But he knew that wouldn't make the pain go away. John sighed and sat next to Lucy, saying nothing more. He was just there, quietly sharing the moment with her. That was all he could do at that moment, not as a police officer, but as a human being, a father, sharing in Lucy's sorrow. After that night, John knew he couldn't let Lucy continue living like that. He wasn't just a police officer, he felt a responsibility for this child. Lucy needed a home, a safe place to live and grow. John decided he would become her temporary guardian until a better solution could be found. He contacted child welfare organizations and handled the necessary legal procedures. At the same time, he brought Lucy into his home, where he lived with his wife and 2 children. Although caring for Lucy wouldn't be easy, John and his family were ready to open their hearts to her. John's wife, Emily, was a kind and understanding woman. When John told her about Lucy and her situation, Emily didn't hesitate to agree to help. She felt her husband's love and compassion for the girl, and she knew that Lucy needed a family to lean on. The first days when Lucy came to live with John's family, she was still very reserved and spoke little. However, with time and the love from John and his family, Lucy gradually opened up. She began to participate in family activities, play with John's children, and gradually feel like she was part of the family. Lucy had been brought to Chief John's house and his family, but adapting to her new life wasn't easy. Even though she had a safe home, the loss of her mother was still an unhealed wound. In the first days at John's house, Lucy spoke very little and mostly wanted to be alone. Although John's family, especially Emily, was very kind and tried to help, Lucy still kept her distance from everyone. John understood that overcoming such a loss couldn't happen overnight. He had witnessed many difficult situations throughout his career. But Lucy's case was special. She had lost her only mother, with no other family to rely on. For Lucy, accepting a new family and opening up to them was a long and challenging journey. Emily and John's two children tried their best to make Lucy feel comfortable and loved in her new home. Emily, with her motherly tenderness, often prepared delicious meals and invited Lucy to eat with the whole family. Although Lucy often ate quietly and didn't join in the conversations, Emily didn't give up. John's two children, a boy and a girl, were eager to befriend Lucy. They were excited when they heard they would have a new sister. John's eldest son, Thomas, loved to play and often invited Lucy to play soccer or take walks around the neighborhood. His younger daughter, Lily, tried to share her toys with Lucy and invited her to watch cartoons together. But no matter what, Lucy remained silent and didn't get too close to anyone. John could see that while Lucy had a new place to live, her pain was still very deep. He understood that what Lucy needed most wasn't just a house but a long-term process of emotional healing. John often spent time in the evenings talking to Lucy. Even though their conversations were mostly one-sided, he didn't force her to speak, he just sat beside her, quietly telling her stories from his life. John often shared about the cases he had solved, the encounters with struggling people he had helped, and the stories about his family. He told Lucy about his loving wife, about Thomas and Lily, the two children he was so proud of. John hoped that by sharing about his life, he could help Lucy feel that she wasn't alone. Although Lucy rarely responded, John persisted because he knew she was listening. One night, after telling Lucy about an old case he had solved, John gently asked, "You must miss your mom a lot, don't you?" Lucy didn't respond immediately. She looked down at the floor, her eyes filled with sadness. After a long silence, she nodded slightly. It was the first time Lucy acknowledged her pain in front of John. John sighed and gently said, "I, too, have lost loved ones, Lucy. It's a pain that's hard to describe. But you don't have to endure it alone. My family and I are always here for you whenever you need us." All changed in her eyes, though it was just a little opening up. It was a sign that she was beginning to accept John's presence and his family's presence in her life. One night, after everyone in the house had gone to bed, John stayed alone in his study. He felt exhausted after weeks of trying to help Lucy integrate. Although he knew it wouldn't be easy, seeing Lucy still drowning in sadness made John feel helpless. He picked up a photo of his family. Looking at the familiar faces of his wife and children, John remembered the happy days when the whole family laughed, went on outings, and shared joyful moments. But now, he felt a heavy responsibility for Lucy. She had gone through so much loss, and he didn't know if he could help her overcome it. A feeling of anxiety and frustration welled up inside John. He had been a police chief for many years, had witnessed many tragic situations, had helped many people through tough times. But with Lucy, he felt powerless. Tears suddenly flowed from John's eyes. He sat there, holding the family photo, tears streaming down his face. It was the first time in many years that John had cried. Not because he felt weak, but because Lucy's pain had touched something deep within his heart. He wasn't just a police officer, he was also a father. And his heart ached to see Lucy suffering something no child should have to endure. Emily, his wife, entered the room and saw John sitting there crying. She gently approached, placed a hand on his shoulder, and sat down beside him. "You've done everything you can, John," Emily said softly, comforting him. "You've given Lucy a home. And that's already incredible. She just needs more time. John nodded. But the sense of helplessness remained. He didn't know what else to do to help Lucy move past her grief. One day, when the whole family was sitting down for dinner, John noticed Lucy was eating faster. Different from previous meals when she usually sat quietly and didn't engage in conversation. Thomas and Lily were cheerfully talking about what had happened at school. And for the first time, John saw Lucy smile at one of Lily's funny stories. John couldn't believe his eyes. It was a genuine smile. Though small. But it was enough to make him feel that his efforts weren't in vain. After dinner, when the family gathered to watch a movie, Lucy sat closer to Thomas and Lily, her eyes lighting up at the funny scenes in the movie. John knew this was a sign of recovery. Lucy had started to open up more to the family. Began to accept that she wasn't alone anymore. Although the pain of losing her mother would never disappear, Lucy had found comfort and love in her new home. As time passed, Lucy gradually adapted to her new life. She started to participate in family activities, play with Thomas and Lily, and especially spent more time talking with John and Emily. Although there were still times when Lucy missed her mother and cried, she had learned to accept her loss and find joy in her current life. One evening, when John took Lucy to the laundromat, the place where everything had started, they sat down by the washing machine where her mother used to sit. John gently asked, "Do you want to tell me more about your mom? I'd love to hear about her." Lucy smiled. Though her eyes were still sad, she began to tell John about her happy memories with her mother. The times they cooked together. The conversations they had in the laundromat. John listened. And in his heart, he felt happy knowing that Lucy could talk about her mother without feeling too much pain. Lucy finished her story. And John saw her smile. He understood that although Lucy would always remember her mother, she had found a way to move on. To remember her mother with love rather than pain. John felt as though a burden in his heart had been lifted. He had succeeded in helping Lucy heal. Not by erasing the pain but by helping her learn to live with it and find joy in her new life. After some time living with Chief John's family, Lucy gradually opened up more. She was no longer the quiet, lonely child she used to be. Although the pain of losing her mother still lingered, Lucy had learned to face it without letting the sadness overshadow her current life. She had begun to trust and feel the love from her new family. After integrating with John's family, Lucy's life gradually became more stable. She started going back to school at a nearby school, where Thomas and Lily also studied. The new school made Lucy nervous. But with encouragement from John's family, especially Emily's gentle guidance, she began to feel more confident. On her first morning at school, Lucy held Lily's hand tightly as they walked down the tree-lined street to school. Other students stood in small groups, chatting happily with each other. Lucy felt a bit awkward, unsure if she could fit in with her new classmates. But Lily, with her cheerful and energetic personality, pulled Lucy into her group of friends. In the first few weeks, Lucy struggled to make friends. She still carried the fear of losing loved ones, and the change in environment made her feel uneasy. However, over time, with Lily and Thomas's help, Lucy gradually felt more comfortable. She began participating in school activities, from joining the art club to playing basketball with her new friends. One afternoon, after school ended, Lucy ran out to the schoolyard where Lily and Thomas were waiting. On her face was a radiant smile, so different from the sadness she once carried. Thomas looked at his new sister and smiled, raising his hand in greeting. "You did great, Lucy." Lucy smiled and replied, "I had a really great day." Over time, Lucy began to build friendships at school. One of her first friends was Sarah, an energetic and open-minded girl from her class. Sarah was the first to help Lucy overcome her fear of making friends, as she kept inviting Lucy to join group activities. One day, Sarah invited Lucy to join a school art project. At first, Lucy was hesitant, but with encouragement from Sarah and others, she gradually became more confident. She began to draw, creating art pieces that not only showcased her talent but also expressed her deep feelings about her mother and her past. The first painting Lucy made was a portrait of her mother, Sarah, with delicate and gentle lines. When she finished the painting, Lucy felt like a part of her inner pain had been released. It wasn't just a piece of art, it was a way to heal herself. An important step in her journey to regain emotional balance. Sarah, upon seeing Lucy's painting, was deeply impressed. "Lucy, you're so talented. This painting is beautiful," Sarah said admiringly. "I'm sure your mom would be so proud." Hearing this, Lucy smiled, though her eyes were slightly wet. "I hope so," she replied softly. While Lucy gradually integrated into her academic and social environment, her relationship with John's family grew stronger. John, as a father, watched every step Lucy took and felt proud to see her growing each day. One evening, after dinner, the whole family gathered around the table. As always, Emily had prepared a hearty dinner with roast chicken, Lucy's favorite dish. Throughout the meal, everyone talked happily about the day's events. Lucy, who used to be quiet in the early days, now began to join the conversation. John looked at Lucy and said, "You've done really well, Lucy. I'm very proud of you." Lucy smiled. She no longer felt like a stranger to this family. With John, Emily, Thomas, and Lily, Lucy felt she had truly found a home where she was loved and cared for as a real member of the family. Although Lucy's current life had become more stable, the memories of her mother were still an inseparable part of her. Lucy knew that accepting her mother's passing was necessary for her to move forward. But that didn't mean she would forget the mother she loved. One Sunday morning, John decided to take Lucy to the cemetery where her mother was buried. He knew that Lucy needed a chance to say goodbye to her mother, something she hadn't truly done before. The whole family went together, bringing flowers that Lucy had picked herself. When they arrived, Lucy walked slowly to her mother's grave. She stood there silently for a long time, recalling all the beautiful memories she had with her mother. The times her mother took her to the laundromat, the stories her mother told her before bed, and the love her mother always gave her. Lucy knelt, placed the bouquet on her mother's grave, and softly said, "Mom, I miss you so much. I'll always remember you. But I'll also live well so you don't have to worry about me. I have a new family now. And they love me. Mom, I hope you're resting in peace." John and his family stood behind her, watching from a distance. They didn't want to interrupt Lucy's private moment. When Lucy stood up, John approached and hugged her tightly. "I'll always be here for you, Lucy," John whispered. "You don't have to face this alone." After visiting her mother's grave, Lucy felt a sense of relief. She knew her mother was always with her, even if not physically. Her relationship with John's family grew stronger, and Lucy found comfort and love in her new home. One weekend evening, the whole family sat in the living room, watching a comedy movie. Lucy sat between Thomas and Lily, laughing heartily at the funny scenes. John sat in a chair nearby, watching her and feeling happy. He had seen Lucy move past her grief and find joy in life again. When the movie ended, the family gathered around the table, chatting and eating cake. Lucy, with a bright smile on her face, said, "I feel so happy being here with everyone." John and Emily looked at each other and smiled. They knew that Lucy had found her way, and her journey of healing had begun to succeed. Lucy was no longer the quiet, sad child she used to be. She had learned to face her past, accept the loss of her mother, and most importantly, she had found a new family, people who were always ready to love and protect her. Lucy's journey wasn't over, but she was ready for a bright future, knowing that her mother was still watching over her from somewhere.